What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. This is another episode for Sabotage Bad Albums, where it is a segment that I review one of the worst albums of all time in my opinion. And this album is no exception. So right here, I am going to be tackling into my few amount of minutes in this review to talk about the Beach Boys album, Summer in Paradise. Summer in Paradise is the Beach Boys' 27th studio album that was released on the 3rd of August 1992. And this was released through Brother Records in the US and also EMI in the UK. Terry Melcher produced the record, and I will have to say that the Beach Boys had been a favourite band for me because they have released records that are incredibly fun, beautifully soft, touching and catchy on some of their earlier albums. And you can't go wrong with Pet Sounds being one of the world's most beloved and acclaimed albums of all time. The Beach Boys had still been a band that I have some memories of because they were a band where their discography is completely packed with different styles to genres of surf pop, pop rock, to a bit of the psychedelia, baroque pop, etc. However, with Summer in Paradise, from my experience to this album, I'll have to say this. Summer in Paradise is one of the worst, most fucking disgusting atrocities to have ever existed in this point in time. This is the only album to not feature Brian Wilson, who I absolutely admire, but sadly he went through very difficult times from his mental health, of his asshole and disgusting person of his psychiatrist, went through abuse from his father, and now with Mike Love taking complete control with the different lineup change in this point in time. And this was at a point for me where the Beach Boys have hit themselves down the drain. The album was made to be, in Mike Love's mind, like a perfect experience and a proper product of celebrating the summer season. And out of the 12 tracks onto this particular album, there is nothing worth of a form of originality. And then the album decides to proceed into other dangerously awful territories of recycling ideas and to completely take away the old version of a Beach Boys number and replace them with a newer modern form with this sort of technology. This has happened many more than just a Beach Boys track that was a old rendition from a different song. This production is really bad. Everything on this record, musically and the whole mixing points, it sounds bright and at points very overproduced. The drums on this record, atrocious, really thin sounding, as if that these kinds of drum tracks are like electronic and sound fake sounding. Some of the songs, when I hear these drums, are loud, that makes the comfortability of listening to the album disjointed. They were mixed so fucking high that I had to turn down the volume. Now, you may think to yourself that some of the songs musically don't sound that bad, but that is the problem. The problem here, this record is tricking you. It's forcing you to have a point of trying to get into this record because of how this kind of music sounded. But in my opinion, this album's music is contrived, really bloated, boring and weak in comparison. Hot Fun in the Summertime, where they try to pay a homage to the classic Sly and the Family Stone number, but at the same time, with this kind of production, it sounds completely assaulting, not only onto the drums, but the sound of the vocals, the multi-tracked parts. The only album, possibly, that it was entirely made by the software of Pro Tools. And this album doesn't suck because of that software, but it's the overall experience overshadowed with these really below average renditions of these covers, and Hot Fun in the Summertime is barely anything worth of a proper great cover comparing to the classic Sly and the Family Stone song. Then you go to the song of Surfing, which they had done previously from the early 60s. Stupid. Pointless. I'm actually really struggling to find other words because this record made me in awe, and I just couldn't help but to pause all of the tracks on any spot to have a big amount of thinking why this record and music was made this way. Surfing is a really bad attempt to try a bigger amount of power and passion, strongly cheesy, to the point that this rendition is really devoid, trash. Then you go to the song Summer of Love. Summer of Love. Garbage. It's one of the worst excuses of a track, and even the music video does not make the cut. Who the fuck thinks that this music video is acceptable to have Mike Love in front of your face with the camera really close to him and have younger women around him enjoying this kind of beat, enjoying this music? No, really abysmal. One of the biggest pieces of a commercialized, forced turds of this point in the Beach Boys' career. Under the Boardwalk, the Drifters originally, and the Beach Boys' version of the song is terrible. It is so boring, it's slow, and even the saxophone solo couldn't make it appealing. Also, one thing, back to Summer of Love, it was originally going to be a collaboration with Bart Simpson from The Simpsons. Yes, imagine how that would turn out to be. But the producers of the show turned down the offer, and it was used instead in an episode of the show Baywatch. Remember Walking in the Sand, originally done by the Shangri-Las. This cover is one of the worst covers I've ever heard. Appalling. It's juvenile, bad on itself. The chorus does not shine. Boring backing vocals, and even on the instrumentation, derivative. So stale, it takes the piss on the Shangri-Las original. Now here is a person named John Stamos, who was in the TV show of Funhouse, who has been a long-time fan of the Beach Boys. He could be another addition to the Beach Boys' sound. Yet alone, Mike Love says, "Hey, I like you. Let's put you in this album for the first time." And what did they do for him? They decide to conclude the album with the track of Forever, which was previously done by the Beach Boys with Dennis Wilson's beautiful, gorgeous vocals that was made 20 plus years ago. And the way John Stamos had done this, even on the instrumentation, this is again another recycled, poorly executed idea, with John Stamos' vocals tries his best why he would attempt to make something like how Dennis Wilson have done. But even with the original track of Dennis Wilson's vocals, hearing his vocals had some more beauty than this version itself. And yet alone, this track was not originally going to be included on this album in the first place. I can't believe I have to really think to myself that this record has been in the making. The other instrumentals on some songs of the album, Island Fever, it tries too hard to intrigue the listener, forgettable. And even on this ballad of Slow Summer Dancing One Summer Night, a lackluster ballad, misrepresents a ballad from a Beach Boys song entirely. Because the previous Beach Boys ballads beautifully portrayed, even on the wonderful harmonies, they added a lot of texture. They were perfect and so memorable. But this cover is unmemorable, totally flat on its face. It does nothing to appeal me. Lahaina Aloha is the only song where I guess it tries to have a bigger form of structure, and I think this was the only song passable. If they would have started the album with this kind of track, I wouldn't mind it, where they could have started things so decently, but no, they just decided to force this kind of shit of collections, of awful renditions, to modernize Beach Boys classics, and this is more or less a disastrous result. I can't believe Mike Love decides to defend this album and to think that this is worth of a good product. It's a cash grab. How can you compare this record as a good album? And no wonder this album is a complete failure. It sold barely 1,000 copies when it came out, and there were no vinyl pressings of this. You can only purchase the original pressing on CD and on cassette. This record, if I have to say a one-line review without going on about this much about this album sounds commercialized, but it failed to commercialize to an audience. Summer in Paradise by the Beach Boys is preposterous, soul-sucking record where it just does not exist in its full glory. Finished listening to this album, this makes me question myself that how can music like this would be even worth of a damn? This is a time waster for 44 fucking minutes of this pile of shit. And it also questions me that to think of other albums from the 1990s that had released, I can't even think of another album to surpass this, and even to say that an album like this could be potentially the worst record of 1990s era period. This is the number one. This is the worst record of the 1990s. That's how terrible this record sounded. The product of this thing made me completely speechless. How can you fuck up some of the greatest American bands of all time in music history and to have Mike Love torture ourselves and to force these disgusting foods, these awful recipes, feed it to our mouths and to think this is a good taste? Don't listen to this album. I'm actually, right now, making my brain feel uncomfortable. This album made me so angry, as almost as heavily aggressive when I had reviewed Angelic to the Core by Corey Feldman. I gotta say this. Fuck it. This is one of the top 5 worst albums of all time. Not even worth of a respectable record of this album could try to change my feelings. This is not respectable. I would have respected Lulu so much more than listening and respecting this something of an album. That's all I want to say about this record. Summer in Paradise by the Beach Boys. Really awful record, and it's just such a non-consistent, bland, bastardized attempt to force our money. Don't listen to this record. I'm repeating myself here because I can't believe it. I've got to end this. Thank you guys for watching, and also a fuck you to Mike Love. I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.